Next up is somebody whose biography is far too long for me to try and condense, but Tina Woods has all kinds of connections with the world of healthcare. She talks to people in all levels of society. Tina, please, the floor is yours. Tina Woods.
Right. Oops. So, hello everyone, and it's so great to be here, and thank you so much, Aubrey and Martin, for inviting me. Really pleased to be here, and I've been having a wonderful time. Unfortunately, my voice is back, so hopefully I can speak for 22 minutes. So here we go. So I, as David said, I wear a few hats, and a lot of them have been about really trying to bring longevity science and technology into the mainstream, and that's really through connecting all the different sort of power brokers and influencers, whether it's government, the investor community, public sector, the general public, the scientific community. We all have to sort of get behind, taking this all into the mainstream. So a lot of my work has been really about that over the last, 3, 4, 5 years now, actually. So I'm going to speak a little bit to the various projects that I've been involved with, including my most recent one, which has been it's been in incubation for the last 3 years, which is the Quantum Healthy Longevity Innovation Mission, which I'm getting off the ground with a huge international community, but very specifically with my colleagues at the UK National Innovation Centre for Aging, Nick Palmerini and Lynn Corner, who are not here today. So I'm going to pepper my talk with how really I've had to sort of engage and kind of bring, and I completely agree with Dylan and about, and really pleased to see Dylan and the work that A4LI have been doing to kind of really engage the policymakers, because that's been a huge part of what I've been doing, and it's great to see that they've made so much progress. But what I thought I would do first, and of course Andrew, who I know very, very well, and who's obviously presented some pretty impressive stats for why we do need to take this seriously. So I just thought I'd just kind of put a little bit, not the sort of the bad news side to this, but it's effectively the burning platform for really what I'm trying to do here with a huge international community, and why actually we should really kind of, in a sense, have a bit of a sort of a reality check here. So, I mean, obviously we know that the general trend has been that we're living longer, but actually we have some life expectancy is not going in the right direction for a lot of countries, and it's not just to do obviously with COVID. So that's kind of like the worrying signs here, and of course, life expectancy has been dropping in the US, all kinds of different reasons, and of course even in the UK, the rates of change, the rates of increase that we've been seeing have been starting to decline. And of course, we have this terrible situation where we have a widening gap in healthy life expectancy between richest and poorest. And it's only getting worse. It's not getting better. And COVID has obviously exacerbated that. So just, that slide there, or that graphic there, just shows that, the typical average American male now has the same chance of living a healthy life as someone in Blackpool in England, which is one of the most deprived areas in England, which has a pretty low healthy life expectancy. And I think that 20-year gap in the UK certainly has really sort of been the focus of a lot of the work that I've been doing. Now, Andrew mentioned this government goal of increasing healthy life expectancy. Now, that actually has been a goal with the UK government since 2017. And linked with that is also this desire to shorten and decrease health and well-being inequalities. So I think, and actually what we're seeing in the big message, certainly that's grabbed the attention of the UK policymakers, is our poor health in the UK is actually creating a drag on our economic recovery and growth. I mean, we have people falling out of the labor market, the plus 50s, not only, mainly due to physical, sort of poor physical health, not only to do with that, but we have this mental health crisis in our younger populations, and actually that's very much a factor in some of the declines in life expectancy that we've been seeing in the US, for example, suicides, opioid addiction, etc. So these are pretty shocking things that are happening, even though we spend so much money, and look at the US, there's so much money is spent on the healthcare system. In the UK context, the NHS is now spending 40% of its budget on largely lifestyle-driven diseases, and actually more and more of our tax money is actually being spent in the NHS to deal with COVID backlogs, etc., meaning that there's less and less money available for dealing with the root causes of our ill health: education, housing, all these sorts of things. So there's a huge system re-engineering piece of work here that needs to be done. So I think, we have, as we know, we basically have a sick care model, and we need to change that. And we need to actually look at, and this is very much at the heart of the mission project that I'm going to be talking about in a minute, is looking at those sort of links between the biology, the psychology, the behavioral factors for aging well across the life course. And I know Brian Kennedy spoke a lot about that yesterday, because that really is the 80% of our determinants of our health that we can do something about. So just moving on to what we're trying to do with the National Innovation Centre for Aging and my colleagues around the world, is to ask this question: how can these serious issues and these serious problems still be happening? We've got the tools, we've got the science and the technology, we've got the knowledge actually to do much better, to bring all these developments. And to take actually what we've been discussing at this conference, bringing it into the mainstream and actually really starting to address some of these serious challenges. And I think, listen, I see this very much as a system change sort of process. And with that, you do need to engage, as I mentioned, all the key groups in this. And we know that, if we did this and if we were able to sort of put the resources much more upstream into prevention and to really deal with some of the social issues of our time, and also really start to explore the links between climate and health, which of course are obvious, air pollution, diet, etc., we could actually have far more impact. And I was really pleased to see and hear Matt Cabelins, who I don't know, and I must speak to him again. He urged us to be really honest, at this conference, and he reminded us that our understanding, we tend, at the moment, we're really looking at what we know, and we must spend more time looking at what we don't know yet. And I think that's a really, really important challenge for all of us. He asked this question: why has longevity longevity interventions, why have they stagnated over the past 10 years? And we need bigger, bolder ideas. And we have to accept that the hallmarks of aging, they ignore the broader sort of systemic process in humans as very, very complex beings. And I think that's the new frontier that we really need to start looking at. Environments keep on coming up, whether it's mice in controlled environments, wild environments, the environments in which we live. These obviously have a huge bearing on our health, and so we can't ignore that. And of course, those environments, that creates a link between the climate and health sort of connection. So I think this is the next frontier that I think, is really the interesting space that we must look at as a community, and really challenge ourselves. What really should we be spending our time and efforts and resources looking at? We have to say there's still no drug or molecule that will outdo the effects of, poor diet, air pollution. If you're stressed, if you're worried about money, if you're poor and you're worried about your kids playing in the playground because of gangs, that's going to take 10 years off your life. And so, these are the realities of the situation of what we're living with today. And I mean, I'm obviously speaking more around, some of the US, the UK, and so forth specifically. But I think, and we have to remember that lifestyle interventions, they do actually target the hallmarks of aging, and they can add 10, 20 years to our life. So I think these are the sorts of things that I'm working on with my colleagues in the National Innovation Centre for Aging, to really look at how we can also look at the UK, as many of you will know, especially we've been having a bit of a hard time coming out of Brexit. We've got cost of living crisis, we've got the war, in Ukraine that we're dealing with, as all of us are. But they have this ambition to be a sort of a science and tech superpower, which I'll speak to in a few moments. But how can we do that? And of course, they're very, very interested in obviously harnessing, frontier technologies like AI, quantum, systems biology. So that is at the heart of what we're trying to do with this mission. So now this mission has been in gestation. I'm sorry, I'm just going to take a bit of water here. This mission has actually been in gestation for about 3 years. And many of you will know that I've been quite involved I'm working with the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Longevity, which I set up with Damien Green, who is the former Deputy Prime Minister of the UK. He was actually very involved in setting this government manifesto commitment of increasing healthy life expectancy and minimising health and well-being inequalities. And so we ran that for 4 years, and actually a lot of the work that I'm doing now is as a result of some of the key recommendations that came out of our first report that was actually published a month before COVID. And then COVID came out, and we realized actually the recommendations were even more important. So two of those, which I'll speak to, so that first Lancet article you see there was published about soon after we issued the report, Health of the Nation report, and it was just making a commentary on COVID, the COVID experience in the UK, and how the data just showed how unhealthy the UK was, and we're still suffering. We still rank way bottom of the list in G7 in Europe, etc., in terms of our health, and also in the other sort of statistics, life expectancy, healthy life expectancy. So the second Lancet article speaks to some work we did with the Open Life Data Framework. So that was, which got the support of our Science and Innovation Minister, which was really looking at harnessing data sets outside the medical care record, looking at the data sets across the wider determinants of health space, health-relevant data in the private sector world, in all the different places that actually will give you far more clues about our health status. And of course, when you're looking at the world of AI and quantum and all the rest of it, it's really, really important data. So we published that last year, and that was coincided with the launch of Business for Health, which Andrew Scott is involved in, as he's on our core working group. And actually with Business for Health, what we're trying to do there is really look at the tools and the metrics and the methodologies to measure and incentivize the business world in contributing to the nation's health. So we're working with the ONS, the ONS team. We're working with the chief economist at the Department of Health, DWP, Department for Work and Pensions, and we actually issued our first tool, the Work Health Index, last year, and are looking at a whole bunch of initiatives to kind of essentially bring health into ESG investment, looking at the business world, how they can prioritize investment in areas that do less harm. So, for example, the food industry has come up a few times, poor diet, ultra-high processed food. We know that those are actually driving the obesity epidemic. So why don't we take, and this is what we're looking at, what we're doing in climate with disinvesting away from fossil fuels, clean energy, etc., and do the same approaches. So we're speaking to, the whole kind of financial world, the investor community, about, the tools that will allow us to be able to do a similar sort of thing that has been taking place in climate. So these are the sorts of things that came out of that initial work with the APPG and actually laid the foundations for the mission. And you'll see that last Lancet piece that was issued in November, just this last year, that set out the whole basis of how we're approaching this quantum healthy longevity innovation mission, and actually using some of the thinking around access to data and how we harness AI, etc. So I'll just go into detail about that. So really what we're saying, and this is our whole sort of scientific construct and we laid this out in the Lancet article about the scientific framework around the concept of the exposome, which really encapsulates all the different stresses that humans face in their environments, that obviously affect all the hallmarks of aging, inflammation, etc. But it really includes, everything from the food that we eat, our psychological state, the houses in which we live, the activities that we do, obviously fitness, all these sorts of things. And I think we also are finding out that some people are much more resilient to these factors in our lives, stress, financial stress, whatever it may be, than others. And I think this is a concept which is really starting to grow more and more, getting a lot more attention in sort of scientific discourse and public health, etc. And understanding how humans adapt to those stresses in our environment is, again, part of this new frontier that I think we really need to be looking at. And a lot of that actually, and I think, we're all enthusiasts here, and I think we all know that a big part of what drives us is our sense of hope, our optimism, our sense of control, masters of being of our destiny. These sorts of things, actually are affecting our inner state, our biology, and understanding that, again, is part of this next frontier of science. So we're really pulling together, and part of this mission is very much about harnessing that data and that understanding to really deliver on the next generation of products and services, and be part of, new trials, new innovative trials, et cetera, to test these sorts of interventions. So fundamentally, we need to really spend far more time understanding the links between the biology, but also the psychology and behavior in humans. I mean, behavioral change keeps on coming up over and over again. And we know that this sort of loss of physical, this homeostasis has come up a few times already in this conference. And we know that the loss of physical and psychological resilience in aging, of course, varies between people, it varies across our life course, it varies between tissues and organs, and it just shows how complex everything is, really, and how our environments are so important to this. We also know that changing behavior is so tough, and we know that it's come up so many times at this conference, and we need to make keeping healthy easy and cheap, and fast. So we need the right environments to be able to get people to make the right decisions about their lives. And if it's not woven in the fabric of our everyday lives, it just won't happen. So I think this is where all the behavioral change techniques, nudging and rewards, these are all being sort of factored into a lot of health tools today. And I realize I'm actually running out of time fairly quickly, so I'm going to start speeding up a little bit. So psychological aging is something that I know colleagues like Alex Zavaronkov are really looking at, which is fascinating, and he did some really interesting work showing how loss of sleep, stress really does actually affect the biology using dedicated clocks. So this just presents the vision for what we're trying to do actually with the mission, and it's sort of essentially trying to create a world testbed for health, a federated system where essentially we can, and you'll see some of the outputs there, which I'll come on to in a little bit. I mean, we've talked a lot about aging biomarkers. Obviously, we have a vision really to open up access to a federated network of biomarker data. So we're already working with groups like Our Future Health in the UK, who are recruiting 5 million healthy volunteers, collecting blood samples. We're connecting with groups like Nightingale Health. They already have probably the world's largest blood biobank sources in the world. And actually, we want to be able to lay the groundwork for next generation sort of products and services, what we call longevity as a service. And we're sort of taking a cells to cities approach, really looking to the future of how we can create longevity cities. And that's something that I've been speaking to a few people at this conference about already. And this just gives you a sense of, we're talking, this is quite a long time frame. So there's a lot of stuff that we're doing now and laying the groundwork for. And actually, my colleagues in Newcastle are already doing some fascinating stuff with the Internet of Caring Things project. They launched, actually, a Longevity Cities mission in July, last month, which I'll come on to as well. So what are the levers? So the levers, and I hope I've got a couple more minutes. Is that okay, David? Because I've got 2 seconds here. But so the levers to really achieve all this change, we know about the science and technology. We've got incredible AI tools. We've got ChatGPT. We've got AlphaFold. We've got groups like Giro.ai who are doing incredible things, looking at dynamic instability and homeostasis, and really trying to understand loss of resilience, etc., in complex human systems. But we also know that we need to activate the consumer, and of course, we already have incredible apps. I was speaking to the founders of New last night at dinner. We've got Humanity, Peter Ward was here. We've got incredible apps that are part of the tools that people can use to understand their health. But of course, we've got an incredible amount of data, capturing data from sensors, from wearable devices, etc., which paves the way for all sorts of digital biomarkers, etc. So, these are the sorts of things that can start to engage consumers. And I mentioned some of the groups like Our Future Health, who are already sort of recruiting healthy volunteers for their studies. But pro-innovation reform is a really interesting concept where the UK are very, very interested in looking at everything from digital identity, personal data wallets, to really sort of look at being able to access data at scale, citizen-consented data, which will be, again, another really interesting way to actually augment, the vast field of data that we'll have to use in this, federated sort of test bed for health. So we're looking at all those developments, and of course, they're already investing a lot in digital infrastructure. We've got a huge plan underway to connect up and create sort of secure data environments within the NHS. So these are all opportunities that we can harness. But most important, actually, in some ways, is sort of private sector and finance reform. So there's some initiatives afoot to really consolidate pension funds, for example, to make it easier to invest in large-scale sort of infrastructure and sort of preventative health projects, for example, investing also in housing, things like that, but also in higher risk sort of innovation areas. So these are all developments that we're keeping a close eye on and actually involving the finance community as well as the regulators and the scientists in a sort of a sandbox endeavor to really look at how we can design, next generation sort of business models, investment cases to invest for health as an asset along the lines of what I've been describing. But fundamentally, and I think this has come up a lot in this conference, is that we actually have to break down the siloization of scientific research. There's a lot of disincentives at the moment that prevent scientific progress, which is something that I see. I'm an assessor at UK Research and Innovation, and you can see there's competition between departments, the whole way in which funding is allocated to research. There's lots of different barriers. There's barriers, all over the place, and these are the sorts of things that we need to start to unpick, and we need a common language, as a community, to really look at how we can spur collaboration and innovation to benefit all of us. So I think I'm going to just quickly talk a little bit. So some of the key aspects of what we're trying to do, there are two fundamental tenets. There's the Exposome AI platform, which is essentially this federated world testbed for health. That is one of the underpinnings of our program. The other one is this concept around City of Longevity, which is really about taking a cells to cities approach. And I mentioned my colleagues in Newcastle. They have already launched and have involved many cities around the world in this endeavor, sort of looking at what works from a city perspective to really generate health, looking at health outcomes. But again, it's all about data capture. So it's almost like these local sort of test beds that are experimenting with what actually works in the city environment. So Newcastle's one, and you see some of the other cities on that slide. Next month, they're launching a toolkit as part of the mission that we're involved in together, which is really looking at what works in different sort of city contexts and being able to share and sort of and have a codified system of actually what works. And that's going to be launched next month. And it's effectively creating a toolkit that cities can use to understand what works in different contexts. And we're about to launch a City of Longevity Challenge, which is really looking to inspire sort of the policymakers at a local level, sort of mayors, city managers, etc., to kind of to look at how we can add 1 extra year of healthy life in 5 years and involving 100 cities in that endeavor. So this is what we're rolling out, and we're currently speaking to a number of different places, about getting involved in that. And I've already had a few words with some people here, with Martin in Dublin, and also Honduras, and there's some other places that we're also speaking to be part of this challenge, because that will ignite focus about how we can bring all this amazing research and how we can galvanize and the citizens in each of these communities and actually start to look at policies and investment that will really start to deliver on health in a way that really isn't being done in the way that it could, especially with all the science and technology at our disposal. So I'm going to stop there, and if you've got any questions or want to get in touch about what we're doing, it's obviously a huge endeavor. We're speaking to, and getting, trying to court funding from obviously public sector, philanthropists, the investor community, and actually working with the investor community to design the new business models and new investment models for the future.
Thank you very much, Tina. So many fascinating topics. We'll touch on some of them in the panel, and you can catch Tina afterwards along with the other panelists.